Anmeldungen. Ja, aber so Anmeldungen weiß man nie, wie viele sind mit teilnehmen. Ich hatte so Erfahrung 30%, 30%. Aber schön, dass Sie, die jetzt da sind, hier sind. Wir freuen uns sehr. Zunächst möchte ich mich ganz herzlich bei den Referentinnen und Referenten danken, die heute vortragen werden. Ich freue mich sehr, dass diese Gäste aus verschiedenen Disziplinen kommen, interdisziplinär, aber auch aus einigen Organisationen kommen, interdisziplinär. Das ist sehr schön. Das war unser Ziel, dass wir nicht nur in der Wissenschaft, sondern auch diese Interaktion mit der Zivilgesellschaft haben. Und das ist so ein bisschen erreicht und auch einige Organisationen dabei sind. Das freue ich mich sehr. Also vielen Dank, dass Sie unserer Einladung gefolgt sind und nach Leipzig gekommen sind. Ich bedanke mich auch bei den Teilnehmenden, die heute hier anwesend sind und viele auch online, wird auch live gestreamt. Und keine Angst, Gäste sind nicht im Bild, nur die Vortragungen hier vorne werden im Bild sein. Aber auch jemand, der Probleme hat, kann gerne zu mir kommen. Und genau, soweit von mir. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir diese Veranstaltung heute haben. Vielleicht 2 Sätze noch zum Kontext dieser Veranstaltung. Also diese Veranstaltung wird angeboten vom Zentrum Entwicklungskommunikation, Communication for Social Change. Wir arbeiten dort in 3 Bereichen. Wird auch einige Male dann auch näher vorgestellt, das Zentrum, aber vielleicht so weit, dass wir dort auch ein Forschungsprogramm haben. Ein Programm, wirklich, weil Programm deswegen, weil auch dieses Programm in 3 Bereichen arbeitet. Das ist Forschung, Lehre und Transfer. Dort arbeiten 6 Kolleginnen und Kollegen, sind alle aus Afghanistan. Und das Thema ist Mediensystem und Öffentlichkeit von Afghanistan. Ich sage von Afghanistan, weil nicht nur um das Thema in Afghanistan geht, sondern auch Afghanistan Diaspora, was mittlerweile eine globale Diaspora ist, in verschiedenen Ländern, über 6 Millionen. Wir beschäftigen uns auch, also nicht nur das Mediensystem in Afghanistan, Öffentlichkeit in Afghanistan, sondern auch von Diaspora. Also 6 Kolleginnen und Kollegen forschen das Thema. Und in dem Kontext haben wir auch diese Veranstaltung hier organisiert. Letztes Jahr hatten wir eine erste Konferenz, wo es um Afghanistan ging. Aber in diesem Jahr wollten wir darüber hinaus auch uns damit beschäftigen, was gibt es für andere Diaspora in Deutschland, was auch das Thema dieser Konferenz ist, damit man eine Interaktion hat. Und das ist so ein Thema, was große Lücke ist, nach meiner Meinung nach, für Kommunikationswissenschaft. Sehr viel Arbeit, aber auch Potenzial sehe, dass in der Perspektive man da arbeiten konnte. Genau, also wie gesagt, aus diesem Programm heraus, diese Veranstaltung und mit dem Ziel, dass wir auch andere Forscherinnen und Forscher, aber auch Organisationen kennenlernen. Genau, also ich freue mich sehr auf diese 2 Tage. Heute wird hoffentlich sein, wir haben auch einen 2. Tag, was morgen ist, ein bisschen intern. Werden wir darüber nachdenken, was man auch so etwas perspektivisch machen kann, dass man jetzt hier diese Veranstaltung nicht nur so einmalig und das war's, sondern man auch in Kontakt bleibt. Darüber wollen wir morgen nachdenken. Und heute Abend haben wir ein schönes Programm, ein bisschen Musik und da haben wir auch ein so Art Storytelling, Kollegen über ihr Leben dort und hier erzählen werden, auch über Wissenschaft und Kommunikationswissenschaft was sagen. Genau, soweit von mir. Jetzt gebe ich an meinen Kollegen weiter, Dr. Hazrat Bahar. Er ist auch ein Kollege aus dieser Forschergruppe, ist Postdoc und wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter im Institut für Kommunikation und Medienwissenschaft. So, jetzt Herr Bahar, bitte. Genau, er wird uns dann heute und morgen durch die Tagung bringen. So.
And thank you very much for all who made it and who also watching us online. Sorry for the technical interruption. So at the very beginning, I'll start by inviting Professor Patrick Domkes for the welcome speech. Professor Patrick Domkes is a professor here, and he's also Deputy Dean of Social Science. I very warmly welcome Professor to come and open the conference by his welcome speech.
Hello, everybody, dear guests, dear colleagues. Just another welcome address, and a welcome address with 3 hats on. As mentioned, I'm a Vice Dean of the faculty, and in this position, I warmly welcome you at Leipzig University and the Faculty of Social Sciences and Philosophy. Leipzig University, as you perhaps know, has developed 3 strategic research fields, and one of these strategic research fields is changing order in a globalized world. What do we mean by that? Well, over 100 years ago, George Simmel formulated a very simple, basic question of all social sciences. How is society possible? Or sometimes we say, how are social orders possible? I think we can add to this basic question today, how is society possible in a globalized world? How do societies deal with globalization? How do they and other forms, social formations of social order change? Politics, science, political organizations, families. And what contribution does communication make? So that is my second hat as part of the Institute of Communication and Media Studies here. And our research focus is on the transformation of communication, media, and society in a digital and global world. And we are exploring that here in the so-called Zeppelin House in a very special place. If you came to our institute from the railway station, you walked across the street called Brühl. It's now a street where you can shopping and so on, but in the Middle Age and in early modern times, 2 important trade routes intersected here, the Via Regia and the Via Imperii. Since then, the Brühl, this area here, has been a hotspot of globalization. Until the Second World War, this area here was known as the world routes of furs. Okay, many animals are really glad that it's not longer the case, but this is where Leipzig's reputation as a trading city was founded. And if you continue your walk here towards the city center, you will pass the Nikolaikirche, the Nikolai Church. In November 1982, a very small number of people began to meet here regularly every Monday for a little pray of peace. And they started this in 1982. In the next 7 years, this small group, or today we would say fragmented, fragile counter-public, grew into something big that demanded and enabled participation. And participation is a good word for my third hat, as part of the scientific board of the Research Center for Development Communication, Communication for Social Change. Our center sees itself not only as a research center, but also explicitly as a transfer center. We do not want just make research on participatory communication, but we want to invite the civil society to participate in our research. So for us, scientific communication is not only we know something and we tell you, but we invite everybody to think with us about what could be research questions, what could be good research designs. And that's, I think, something also this conference stands for. So welcome to you all, but please allow me to extend 3 special greetings. First to our keynote speakers, Hanan Badel and Merga Jonas-Bula, who traveled a long way, okay, Berlin, not so much, but Salzburg, to be here today and to give some insights in their current work. Second, to Hazrat Baha and Ali Reza Hussaini, who've been responsible for organizing this conference, and please warm hand clap for all the helping hands. And finally, as Merga did, also to the Volkswagen Foundation for funding the project on the public sphere of Afghanistan, in which context this conference takes place. The Volkswagen Foundation has always been a very generous and fair sponsor of our research and transfer activities. So thank you all, but now finally the conference will start. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thanks again to the speaker who made it in my way. I'll just briefly introduce what Dr. Kefa at the beginning said in Germany. I'll add a little bit more information about the center and also about the conference, but particularly about the conference. There are enough information on our website too. But before that, I just like to remind that this program is also live streaming. It is only about those who are speaking here. It's not for the participants. But again, if anyone has any issues, if they don't want to live stream, please let us know. Diaspora communication in Germany, from fragmentation to participation. This is an annual conference organized by EC4SC, Development Communication and Communication for Social Change. Here, we focus on how communication can create social change through research, teaching, and transfer. We also launched a program that was also briefly introduced by Dr. Kefa, that is media and public sphere in Afghanistan, and also diaspora, Afghanistan diaspora, which is also kind of like a basis for this conference as well. But today it's not only about Afghanistan. Today's topic is beyond Afghanistan. We want to talk about the broader experience of diaspora communities here in Germany, including those from Syria, Turkey, Afghanistan, and African countries. This conference aims to look at how different diaspora communities communicate and engage in Germany. This is an important topic, but that has not received enough academic and research attention, we think. Why does it matter? It's because Germany has become a diverse country. And about 30% of the population has migrant background. And in primary schools, this percentage is more around 40%. And more of these communities are part of diaspora with strong ties both to their homeland and also to Germany. For example, there are around 500,000 people in Germany who are somehow linked to Afghanistan. A similar number exists from Syria, Iraq, Iran, and so many other countries here in Germany. It's also important to understand the difference between exile and diaspora, the two different terms that we have been using. Exile often hope to go back, at least one day, to their home country, while diasporas are more linked in trying to build their life here in the host countries. However, all these groups faces challenges, including discrimination, and this kind of common challenges help somehow to unite them as well. Communication studies often talk about internationalization, but usually as something happening outside of Germany. Germany is also itself a diverse and international, but we don't know enough about how diaspora communities communicate and are connected with, among each other. So we consider this point like a gap that needs to be better understood, and also the structure of their communication, what type of communication they are doing, in what type of structure they are following. So for this reason, this conference we consider is like a first step in this direction. As it was also previously mentioned, that we have invited researchers and experts from organization to bring together different perspectives. We believe that by collaborating, we hope to build a better understanding of how these communities communicate. So it's a brief introduction. It's more like a detailed version of what Dr. Kefa mentioned. Before we invite our first keynote speaker, I'll briefly go through the agenda, today's agenda. After the welcome speech, that will be followed by first keynote speaker. Luckily, we have two keynote speakers. And then we will have presentations. We have divided these presentations in two parts. The first two presentations are immediately after the second keynote speaker. Then we will have a break. And after the break, we will have 4 presentations. And then again, it will be followed by a break, coffee break. And then we will have a panel that will be moderated by Mr. Zaini. And yeah, that's it for today. And at the evening, we have an evening program as well. So the evening program starts at 7 o'clock. We will have music there, we will have dinner there, and you will also hear stories from experts. It's a storytelling session, and there people could also ask their questions if there are any. So officially that evening program ends at 10 o'clock, but we have also program for tomorrow. It's somehow what we call internal. It's between kind of like interaction or exchange of views among the speakers. So that starts at 10 o'clock tomorrow and will end at 12 o'clock. Also, this brief information about the agenda, I think we will also have it. But yeah, as now it's time for the first speaker, Professor Dr. Hanan Badr. She'll be talking about media in diaspora in Arab Valley, dynamics of transformation. Dr. Badr is a professor and head of the Division of Societies and Inequality Research at the Department of Communication Studies, Faculty of Social Science at the Paris London University. So warmly welcome, Dr. Badr.
Thank you so much. The slide or next slide.
Yeah, come on, let's do it.
Okay, thank you very much for hosting me. I'm extremely honored. I've been here to Leipzig University before, and I'm very happy to keep being reminded how beautiful the city is and how rich of a history. So thank you again for inviting me. And I will pick up on what you've said there. the diasporas have so much in common. So I think, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later on to see what parallels there would be between what the Arab diaspora is living and witnessing, and what the Afghan diaspora as well is. So today's title of my keynote speech is called Media and Diaspora in Arab Berlin, Dynamics of Transformation. And it is based on a book that has been recently published called Arab Berlin. It's already published. It's also available as open access transcript. But before I delve with you in the details, I would like to go through the outline. I would like to make the argument why Arab Berlin, why is that title? Obviously, it's not really very rooted in communication studies. It is an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary project because society is much more complex to explain only through the lens of communication studies. And then I would like to go through approaching this ambivalences of Berlin as a city, and then I will do 2 deep dives, one in 2 chapters in the book, one on Amal Berlin. Maybe some of you already know it. Amal Berlin has also a page in Dari Farsi that targets also Afghan diaspora, but it also has Arabic and lately. And also another chapter called Biographies in Motion, highlighting how newcomers, especially migrants who have arrived in the last decade after the Arab uprising, in living, their biographies have been shaken up, and then finally the conclusion. Let me start why Arab Berlin. The simple answer, as we all know as scholars, the innovation, the argument has not been made yet. Looking at the intersections between Arab diaspora and how they contribute to communication and cultural citizenship in Germany has not been made yet. So far, if you Google Arab Berlin before publishing the book, now it has changed a lot, but before publishing the book, if you have searched Arab and Berlin, 2 results or 2 directions of results would have come up. Either Arab clans, obviously linked with criminal actors, or Arab street food. So Arab Berlin wants to highlight that there is a changing scene based on the Arab diaspora, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. There are waves of demographic shifts in Berlin. The Arab diaspora in Berlin has been shaping the city since the 60s and 70s, especially with the Lebanese Palestinian refugees during the Second War. But recently it has attracted more and more what we call white-collar intellectual diasporic actors, which have been also prominently put Berlin on the map as an emerging hub of Arab intellectual life. One of the authors, Amrani, has even compared it to New York in the early 20th century for the Jewish diaspora from Europe. So how it's becoming like such a melting pot for many different diasporic actors, obviously pushed out from the region because of the failed Arab uprisings. The first wave, 2010-11, which has failed miserably in with re-autocratization, countries either falling in civil wars like Yemen, Syria, or a hard grip of re-autocratization like Egypt, or Bahrain, or Tunisia, unfortunately, in the last years. And this intellectual life has gained increasing agency and visibility beyond the fast food and beyond the Syrian shawarma. So in cultural, in academic circles, artistic, political, and even economic life, I've brought some examples. For example, new bookstores have started 15th film Arab festival, so that's in 15th year. So that shows how there is a need and a contribution to the cultural and communicative landscape. Berlin's Arab presence also is reflects the growing Arab population. When you communicate with especially Syrians, they are the largest Arab subpopulation among the Arab-speaking newcomers or migrants in Germany or in Berlin in particular. Some people anecdotally call it Little Syria. When you go around, you know, in the streets of Neukölln or particular streets with rising Arab presence, others would say, yeah, all the former activists who have been imprisoned are here. Also, Little Cairo is also sometimes an anecdotal reference to what Berlin has become. And Berlin in particularly has a very prominent place among the global migratory push and pull factors. We know from migration research that networks and word of mouth is a particular reason for why networks of migrants or not diaspora, who have not evolved in diasporic communities yet, but they attract each other. You know, people would help each other with housing, with maybe support each other. So the massive expulsion factors in the Arab region are coupled with successful stories in Berlin that would attract newcomers there. However, there also needs to be said the Arab community is fragmented. There's also a depoliticized, entirely depoliticized community, what we would call the expat, rather an expat scene. Berlin attracts lots of IT people who are not necessarily part of that visible intellectual or activist or dissident, but which equally also contribute to Berlin's economic growth as taxpayers, as people who contribute to whatever that sector produces in Berlin. But this transformation, the dynamics of transformation, they're very vibrant, as I tried to summarize in those very few minutes. At the same time, we witness a contradictory process. Two parallel processes are taking place. One is the dynamics, or we cannot really call it dynamics of stagnation, but it's the stagnation of the hard legal political structure, which slows down the integration and the visibility of diasporic communities on the one hand. We can call it dynamics of exclusion. And the other softer dynamic that is much more fluid and hybrid is the cultural dynamic, which is moving much faster than the structural discrimination we know in terms of structural racism, structural legal hard shell that sometimes limits the inclusion of some counter public spheres. So we see those two contrasting movements, evolving fluid cultural transformations in Berlin's life on the one hand, which evolves in niche counter-public circles. This is, by the way, Khan al-Janoub. It is the first Arab bookstore in Berlin, which has established a presence in the last 2 years. As the backyard has been an event for book launch events, for parties, mostly taking place in Arabic, which is also a critique that one can pose, but it provides also a safe space for people to push certain narratives that are not accepted in the mainstream books. In the same time, there are illiberal and rigid structures. I mentioned legal structures or even silent exclusion. You know, we all know, or migrants here in the room would know maybe how difficult it is to find housing or to find to be accepted. Maybe when one has a weird name, to get a lease, to find an apartment. So those are the kind of the illiberal, silent, and subtle exclusion, as well as biased media discourses, as right now we also witness in the current migration debate in talk shows, and especially in the light of the recent election results. So the imbalanced media discourses, there are some examples, Hauptstadt am Abgrund, how always in the media, the clans, the criminality, the police, racial profiling, the raids into the Arab district would really shape the image of Berlin, especially for people who do not live in Berlin. So this is the kind of image, oh, Neukölln is such a dangerous district, how could you go there? So there are still the power of the hegemonic frameworks, which have produced cycles of exclusionary discourses of othering and discrimination. And I think it's also not, this could be a parallel. It would not be a second by chance if people or migrants from Muslim majority country would face similar discourses of exclusion and other as well. So what we need is a nuanced perspective beyond the binaries. Also, I'm echoing a little bit of Edward Said's Orientalism. So we need to move beyond the stereotypical images of Arab clans and exotic culinary sensations, which are also a type of a positive racism. You know, oh, that's so cool, you know, like this romanticism as well. So neither negativism nor romanticism. What we seek is to normalize the Arabs as humans, as to humanize the people as beyond other. Berlin, and obviously I'm borrowing here from Tales, Two Cities, English literature standard. It has ambivalent tales and faces. So what we try to capture here is obviously culinary experiences as part, yes, and we cannot negate that, but also education. For the future children, Arab migrants growing between two cultures is also a venue. Or cultural centers, Islamic or mosques that serve both as teaching centers, education centers, but also cultural centers where people would go there and sit and have cafe and eat cake or Oriental sweets. So these bring ambivalences with it and show also further fragmentation of the Arab diaspora community. And as I've mentioned earlier, it also covers a literature gap because still much needs to be said about Arab Berlin. This is a brief, can you, yes, thank you. Oh, you are moving, thank you so much. This is a brief overview of the fields. As I said, it's a multidisciplinary book, includes law, journalism, media studies, philosophy, history, memory studies, sociology, but also science communication, because it has been mentioned earlier. Also, for example, the role of Arab diasporic actors in the education facilities as well, and not this discourse. And those are the 6 parts which cover different aspects of Arab migrant life. We have adopted a kaleidoscopic approach, so it's not really a very hard scientific discourse like with the heavy theory, but rather wanted to curate the book in a way that includes different formats of knowledge production, including short essays as well as interviews, as articles, academic articles if we know them, and also photo contributions to make it more accessible, not only for the wider public, but also for policymakers, because they also need to see how Arab Berlin is there and needs to change. Some of the, or the central line of the argument was that we wanted to return the gaze, and this borrows from the feminist decolonialism by Bell Hooks. Not only that, that scholars in Western socialized academic environments would gaze at those Arab migrants, but rather that people themselves from the community would return the gaze and also look at Berlin from a non-Eurocentric perspective. These are some of the articles that push that narrative in particular. For example, Skandar Abdallah on framing and reframing the queer Arab, or Amir Kopti, a mother writing, "Will my son grow up to be sexist?" and what it means to be parenting a child between two cultures. Or Ihab Rifai on the Egyptian-German transfer of medical knowledge. So in a very highly specialized field of knowledge, and what does it mean on the culture? So in that, it offered multiple epistemic perspectives from within and without, or outside the city as well. Returning the gaze also was manifested by highlighting certain biographies that are forgotten. As we know from post-colonial literature, erasure is a process that takes place when people are not really mentioned. So here, a chapter by Islam Dayeh was highlighting Hassan Tawfiq al-Adl, which was an Arabic tutor working at the University of Berlin more than 100 years ago, and who's was one of the founding fathers of the Seminar für Orientalische Sprachen, but not necessarily remembered in that way. So it shows also how Arab migrants has a longer history, and not only refugees from war zones or people receiving welfare as the this process of shape them. Also Arabic science in the Mongolian cosmos and memories in the nights of despair, which is also very, very interesting to show an Arab-Jewish perspective and a Jewish culture here in Germany, which is also a very rare position and epistemic perspective that needs much more highlighting, especially in today's storm world. So here we also wanted to make forgotten biographies more visible, and obviously following a non-essentialist approach as well. So having said that, there's a huge debate about who is Arab, what is Arab, and Arabs are not. I hope this is so. This is not the central argument at all in the book. There's no claim of a one Arab community. We actually argue again also against the conflation of Arab and Muslim, because there are non-Arab Muslims, there are Arab non-Muslims, so we are aware of those different categories. We don't want to conflate the two categories. And in the last chapter, it was written by Salah Yusuf, a Sudanese poet coming to Germany in the 70s. He actually articulates that very well in the interview. He says, what is an Arab? We have certain ideas about that, but what is really Arab? What does he or she do? Does he or she have to fulfill specific criteria, and what demands? I don't want to enter here a class in geography and history. There is a huge debates about that, but how also multifaceted the region is, and how there are different subcultures and different languages and different confessions as well within that region. So I would like to take two dives that come closer to communication studies. The first one of the chapters focuses on Amal Berlin. Again, maybe a name some of you recognize. Amal Berlin means hope. Berlin. Amal is an Arabic word and also an Arabic name for women, first name. So established in 2017 by Julia Gerlach and Connie Gerlach, Amal Berlin started with newly exiled journalists as an initiative to give them voice and to give them to empower them to speak about the new society they live in. And essentially, they chose the diasporic approach because you have mentioned earlier the difference between diaspora and exile. So the diasporic approach means talking about the new country, the new host country, instead of focusing only on the country where people come from. And it brings different languages together. It also have a German page, obviously for the funders, so that they can follow up what's taking place. And it's in Arabic, Dari, Farsi, and also recently Ukrainian and German, as I've mentioned. The Arabic team has 10 journalists, and now they also have Amal Frankfurt and Amal Hamburg. So obviously it's a very successful platform, and they have also several social media channels on Instagram, on Facebook as well. The idea is giving newcomers a purpose, but also a voice, and to integrate them based on their journalistic work. And in my interviews with the people working there, the main idea is how can migrants really understand and participate if they're not informed in a language that they understand. We cannot expect someone who just come 1 or 2 or 3 years ago to be fluent and be able to read every day the German-speaking newspapers. So that is an offer to integrate people and to make them participate and be able to understand and comment, and even go and vote eventually, depending on the events going on in their immediate surroundings. That's why they are also choosing the local approach in communication. So it's not a national or regional approach, but rather a city-based approach in those to create civic engagement among the Arabs. And also, the article also shares challenges. So obviously funding and financial viability is a problem, as we all know, even for mainstream newspapers, but also to engage people more and to attract credibility and build up credibility. And it seeks to foster cultural citizenship, which is a concept also embedded in communication and participating. And the authors, Abdurrahman Omarin and Huda Galab in that particular chapter, they also explore why International Berlin has very few non-German initiatives in there. So it also shows the limitations. The other chapter 14 is based on an artistic collaboration, academic artistic photo exhibition. It's called Biographies in Motion. It focused particularly on Arab migrants leaving their countries of origin after the failed Arab uprising. So they left because of a political containment, or because out of fear for their safety, or out of frustration. And it covered people working in different cultural aspects, or either literature, journalism, arts, music. And it was a collaboration between myself and a photojournalist, Iman Hilal, who is, works and lives in. The idea was to highlight biographies. We've chosen 8. For example, a Syrian role player who had to leave and was telling very heartbreaking stories about how, when he was tortured by the Assad security intelligence, he did not tell them he was a musician, because they did not want them to break his fingers in order to be able to play after. So he hid his political activism and said, "Yeah, I'm just a civil servant somewhat." So it shows also how there are stories behind those very shortened migrant successful stories we see, you know, the 2-minute clips about the successful Syrian migrant who learned German, you know, and so they're all, I think it's also a contribution to human access. This team is responsible for starting the first public Arab section in a German public library in the Stabi, in the Berliner Staatsbibliothek. So it was based on donations. It also relied on German goodwill to dedicate a room. It's called Bainatna, which means among us in Arabic. And finally, this is an Iraqi Kurdish artist who also has settled down near Berlin, starting a new life again with artistic expression and finding his voice. Now, one book is not enough. We could not, as I said, there's no claim that we could tell all the stories or all the epistemic perspectives we wanted to have said. Not all has been said. We need more voices to be represented, but this is, you know, as we all know, in scholarship, in books, there's a word count. There are voices who declined, who could not meet the deadline. So what I wanted to say is, maybe if this is what you would remember from this keynote speech, is that we need more, but also the process of producing that book reminded us of limitations of knowledge production from a marginalized minority within a mainstream Western German-speaking academic framework, and what limits of self-censorship are there. We've had authors who withdrew and said, no, I cannot participate, or I cannot write in that book. The book was written before October 7th last year. You know, it took 2 years to recruit the authors, but we could also see that, especially for the Arab community, what's happening in Gaza and now Lebanon and Syria is also leaving its shadows on the Arab community, and adds further questions on how this counter-public narrative and perspective is being acknowledged or received or even interpreted in the mainstream society. Here there are some snapshots from also prominent migrants who have built their communication without a medium, but only through social media as individual, say hobby citizen journalists, you know, but who would cover regularly some events, but also the Khan al-Janoub, which also would contribute to cultural events. And I think on the overall, this is just the first attempt to show what Arab Berlin is, how it's evolving, how the intellectual life is evolving. And there would be reasons for hope and reasons for despair. As Abdurrahman Umarin from Ama Berlin says, we're here to stay. We are part of Berlin, and we want to be recognized as part of the city as well. Maybe questions for future exploration is what it means to do emotional labor for a marginalized epistemic position, especially when you belong to that community that you're researching and working with, as well as, and I'm reflecting on that as a female scholar of color and a migrant mother myself. but also what are the nuances of inner Arab dynamics, because there is inner Arab rivalry. So, for example, the Yemenis would say, "Oh, the Syrians are taking all the money. No, we are forgotten. No one looks at the horrible things that are taking place in our country." And there will be also selective solidarity and even mutual exclusion, even among the Arab communities themselves or sub-communities, which I think also needs a nuanced look at it. But also, how can non-elites be part of scholarly work on Arab Berlin? So beyond the privileged space of scholarly actors, how can we reach out to regular blue-collar people to make them part of that active and participant diasporic community? There are even, and this builds also on some research in the book, there are people who have been living here for decades who have the German passports but do not vote from with Arab heritage. What does it mean? How can we make them more active and make them recognize the value of their participation? Yeah, that would be all. Thank you so much, and sorry if I stopped.
Oh, is niet van wacht, ik was captain is it?
Thank you very much, Doctor. Very much, Professor Brother. Yeah, it was a very nice overview about, particularly about Arab. Need questions? If yeah, we have like a 4 minutes for that. I think we have 2 hands raised. Yeah. I like to, apart from all those things, one sentences I noted, when work is not enough, I think this conference is also part of that to make it more. Yeah, okay, we have 2 minutes raised, so we have time, yeah. Dr. Mega and then Cynthia. Dr. Mega.
Yeah, thank you. Does it work? I think. Hello? Yeah, yes, it works. Thank you very much, Professor. It's very insightful presentation. My question is that I've dealt also under supervision of my Professor Dr. Fatah on diaspora communication, and diaspora is often put aside in academic area, but also in media is not that much focus where many initiatives get involved. You have also mentioned in limitations of knowledge production, and you call for more exploration in your questions. And that shows also there is a gap. I just want to ask what major factors are out there that diaspora, focus on diaspora research or in academic or non-academic, pull aside, what would be the major factors? Thank you.
I think we may take the second questions too, then Professor will, yeah.
Second one?
Thank you, Professor, for your insightful presentation. My question goes to your last statement of your presentation, especially concerning the election. Because I think when we go, election is about representation of people who are going to fight for us and our rights and our needs. So when we go to vote, we haven't identified people in whom we trust and we believe that they can actually fight for us. So you mentioned that there are people who lived in Germany and they don't go to vote. So my question is, maybe they never find that representation in the election. And if that is the case, then how do we engage them to partake in this election? Because it's no more about their host countries, it's about where they are living and contributing. It's important for them to participate in the political life. So how do we actually trigger their interest? And the second part of the question is it left to them to actually find interest in the election, or is the question of a communal action between them and the social structure to ensure that there's this togetherness in election representation.
Thank you so much. I'll start. Thank you very much for the. Do I need that?
Yes.
Okay.
For the online.
Audience. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for the very interesting and insightful questions. I'll start with Dr. Mega's question about the diasporic communication and connecting it to the limitations of knowledge production. Obviously, it's a rising research agenda. I mean, this is the good news. So it is rising, but it is very slow, and it could be evolved in a faster way. And I have Dr. Isaac here, who's been one of the also first people who've worked on it on the Iranian diaspora. I think what we need to push diasporic communication into more mainstream position in the landscape. I'm talking about German-speaking landscape, because in the UK, in the US, there are different of knowledge and different type of knowledge. I think to acknowledge that it is important and to highlight the structural element of that, which is where do the calls for research go? Where do the funding lines go? And we're part of the network called Cosmopolitan Communication Studies. It's a DFD network which has come to the conclusion that the German motor of funding knowledge in communication studies is very much determined by the big tech innovations, so big data, rising EU policies on social media platform and all that. So it's very strongly driven by technological innovations, not necessarily societal calls for inclusion, and also securitization paradigm. So even studies on diaspora or migration in general is focusing on terrorism and anti-terrorism and anti-migration. So it's a very affirmative research line that helps the policymakers. Okay, what do we deal now with that security threat? Instead of giving the migrants and diasporic actors a voice and seeing them as empowered citizens, or include them in terms of the decolonial feminist research practice, as it should be. Give them voice, let them return the gaze, listen. Participatory research approaches, which develop much more in the humanities and anthropology lines, and not as much in the very much positivist Anglo-American oriented communication studies. And maybe people here in the room know how the German-speaking communication studies and media studies are a little bit divided epistemologically, and this has been also for me as someone socialized in Cairo, where I got my BA and MA from there. Cairo University was for me a little bit a surprise in the first 2 or 3 years. So maybe more in the coffee break about that. But again, this conference is not the last one, definitely, and I think Leipzig University here and the center is doing a great job in putting that agenda and connecting social changes. The other question, thank you very much. It is also prevalent and uncertain times, especially in the light of the election results. I think for many migrant friends and people say, okay, where do we go now? What happens? What's happening? One of the lack of people who represent migrants and diasporic voices is certainly a structural factor. Who to vote for? Even parties betray their agenda. So a party that has been historically linked with peace suddenly funds wars. So it's a party historically linked to climate action suddenly accepts decisions when it's in power that would have not been accepted if they've not been voting. So it's also, I think, even for bio-German voters, also a little bit of a difficulty whom to vote for as well, so just to be fair. But I want to say that, or remind us of Naika Furutan's work on how she compares a former East German, DDR Bürger, and also newcomers, and says, yeah, both are trying to find their voice in a way. And I think this is a very interesting hypothesis to see people who are evolving new cultures, have a certain political culture, a certain socialization. They need time to build structures that give them voice. And on the positive side, the newly established parties, whether I agree or disagree with them, that's not my point. But the fact that there are parties that are being started means that there is something. The public sphere is being negotiated and renegotiated. So, also one last thing, because I think the time is up. We need to be aware that many people coming from the Arab countries come from authoritarian countries where politics is associated with negative consequences. So they are sometimes scared. No, I have nothing to do with politics. So it's also something we need to bear in mind when we ask them. So they say, no, I don't like problems. I don't want to vote. So that's also part of it. Doesn't mean that they are disempowered or disinterested. It means also they have been socialized in certain contexts where they learn to associate politics with fear. And it needs them some time to learn. Usually they should not be feeling afraid here, even if it has been changing in the last years. Migrants, that fear is also rising, especially when you look at honestly, not what the neo-Nazis are doing in the protests. This is scary and okay, but they are not the political actors. What is scary is what comes from political actors in this establishment. So kind of a discourse that people, 10-year-old children, think they will be deported and denaturalized because they're not really truly addressed. I think this is also what needs to go to the policymakers and to be more responsible with what they are saying, because their exclusionary discourses give more prominence than small radical here, but I think
There might be other questions too, but so the next keynote speaker is Dr. Mega. Dr. Mega Yunus Law, Media Communication and Diaspora expert. Dr. Mega has extensive experience and expertise in diaspora communication, and luckily, he's also now part of our team here for the Center for Communication and Communication for Social Change. So we are warmly welcome Dr. Mega. He'll be talking about communication, collective identity in the diaspora. Please, Dr. Mega.
Thank you very much. Like you said, I'm part of the organizing team, so I have the privilege to welcome you on behalf of the team. And it's also a privilege to be back to this institution where I did my PhD under Professor Patrick Longes. My work is titled Transnational Communication and Identity Construction in Diaspora, and which resonates also with the theme that we have today here. That's communication in diaspora, especially from the German perspective. That's why I just took the focus to present communicating collective identity in diaspora for today. Before I go deep to the presentation, I'll give you a bit of introduction. I will start how pronouns globe or help us communicating a collective identity, and what kind of theoretical underpinnings are there to communicate our collective identity. I will set a stage by sharing diaspora experiences that emerge from my work as well, and also focus on what kind of power does communicating collective identity has, and what role does communication play in shaping this identity. At the end, I will focus on talents and opportunities briefly, and close with a call to action. So, this is KI generated or artificial generated picture, which is created. Just came up with this idea of like, how can I make my presentation more likable and going to the eyes of my audience? So, like I said, pronounce of communicating collective identity starts with the I. You know, when you come to this world, I know myself, and then I know my family and my neighbor. So it starts with the I and develop into the we. And the we is the cornerstone of communicating collective identity. And of course, the we alone is not enough, but there should be the others that's also somehow help constructing this collective identity. That is the they. So the theoretical underpinnings here is that I focus on communication from interpretism perspective and also social construction, because my argument is that transnational communication, which for example, online, social media, platforms, help us communicating our collective identities at the same time constructing them. And one of these collective identities is diaspora. So the meaning that we construct through our exchange on social media platform, this meaning can be attached to our collective identity, in which we call ourselves we. Foster and Bochner argue also that communication and social construction is coterminous. By this, they meant that the moment I engaged in researching, writing, and publishing about communication, I automatically engage in social construction. So it's also vice versa. So this shows how they are really have overlapping areas. I took also some examples from Berger and Luckman to give you more a clear picture of that. For instance, at the I stage, I watched somebody talking their collective identity. And I say, are they crazy? There they go again. But at some point, at the we stage, I join their communication. And then I start identifying myself. Oh, there we go again. This is who we are. And to finish the construction of the we, as the I, different I's join the we set the tone saying that this is who we are. This is how things are done. That means our collective identities are accepted, established, respected, valued. These are the words that describe the final construction. So the diaspora experience I'm talking about is from my study. I took 4 diaspora communities that came from Horn of Africa. 2 are aligned along country-oriented diaspora community, and these are Eritrean and Ethiopian diaspora community, and 2 ethno-national oriented diaspora communities. They are the Oromo and the Somali diaspora communities. For some of you, might be far away. For some of you might know it closely who these diaspora communities are. But to give you a little bit of detail, of course, when these diaspora communities migrate from their home country or homeland, they don't just travel with their luggage alone. They travel with their histories, stories, and also with their collective identities. That's why I also use some migrated collective identities. And here, homeland plays a huge role. You cannot talk of diaspora without talking the homeland, of course. And I took the direction of doing my PhD on online communication because I see that communication online from the perspective of, Horn of Africa is in conflict, and that is the stage where they come together, do solidarities, alliances, and call for activism or mobilization. So I observed it in my analysis. I also came to the conclusion that as this communication platform advances, so does also their, let's say, as the conflicts and wars in our part continues, that contributes to displacement and migration of people. That again contributes to the widening of diaspora population. So That means in the future, we cannot avoid talking, communicating our collective identities. And that is also where I wish and I hope at some point, diaspora communication will take this respected place. Before, I just want to talk about as there are offline diaspora communities, we see them today, there are various offline diaspora communities who don't know each other. They're geographically far away from each other. They don't know each other personally, but they are only connected because they share common collective identity. So there are also then virtual diaspora communities. Yeah. So, the power of collective identity. Communicating collective identity in diaspora is not only about further construction and maintenance of that identity. It's also about empowerment. It's about strength. It's about resilience and unity. One of the questions in the conference website mentioned was that what role do diaspora communities play in advocacy efforts both within Germany and in their countries of origin? And how are these efforts communicated through various media channels? I dissect into two their role in this advocacy. They could be a peacemaker, they could also be a peacebreaker. How? They could be a peacemaker in seeking justice, fighting for human rights protection, and so on. But they can also be peacebreakers by contributing to mistrusts and conflicts, not only within the diaspora communities, but also in their land of origins. For instance, sharing disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, conspiracy theories. One can see that lightly, but honestly speaking, on the ground, it affects people's lives. This is what I've been also observing in my practical world. So what role does communication play in shaping this identity? I argued in my work also that we need to first understand the content, the substance of what they communicate online. So that helps us to describe what do actually they talk. From the social constructionism perspective of communication, it's not only what they talk that matters, it's also how they talk, what kind of meaning they create during this communication, what kind of relationship they share in communicating about the content. So, for instance, while doing the description, one of the major focus that respondents noted is that they communicate more often about identity politics. Even if they start talking about coffee, cappuccino, as one of the respondents mentioned here, the communication goes back to politics. So I asked one, why do you bother to talk about your collective identity? You are in a safe zone, safe country, relatively, better than where they come from. He said that it matters to him because his home is on fire. And when his home is on fire, he cannot sit down and wait. He has to throw some water to save his country. So here, the word home, even if they're in diaspora, still plays a huge role. Then comes interpretation. After describing the content, we do the interpretation. And from my analysis, I understood that the contents are both cohesive and divisive. Not only between two diaspora communities, even within the diaspora community, like Arab community, it's not homogeneous. It's heterogeneous, not with the color, but with even opinion, views, and so on. So it could be cohesive, also at the same time divisive. And of course, naturally, intra-based contents takes the priority compared to the communication that they have with the other diaspora because of its proximity and urgency. Of course, also, some of their communication online depends on the issue that is happening back in their land of origins. For instance, Ethiopia and Eritrea were enemies for many years, but 2018, they became friends, and the same thing happened also in diaspora. Their communication online is more of solidarity and supporting each other. And now, before 1 year, they get back to the old place, again now in the animosity. So you can see that also on the social media platform. And I use for this interpretation 9 tools suggested by Hollander and Gordon. For instance, here you can see storytelling, emoting, forecasting, evaluating, and others. For instance, an Eritrean diaspora community remembers Independence Day by storytelling. And the Ethiopian diaspora community emotes hashtag Ethiopia prevails at any cost. And for the Oromo diaspora community, the Oromo, they are not only in Ethiopia, they are also in Kenya. But when they come in diaspora, they are united. The geographical difference doesn't play a huge role. So they forecast self-determination and even including secession so that they can populate their own country. And for the Somali diaspora community, who also originate from Djibouti, from Somali in Ethiopia, from Somali in Kenya, when they come in diaspora, they are united by their Somaliness. And what they wish to see and evaluate is about their peace and security in the country, their land of origins. And they promote emancipation from clan supremacism. Because, like I said, even if Somali speak the same language, follow the same religion, they are also heterogeneous when it comes to clan-based. And this clan-based has led to many violences, and also when you look at their communication online, you can see the differences, how they attack each other based on their clans. So what challenges and opportunities are out there? The challenge I want to start from the hosting community. Of course, there are language barriers that we have been dealing with, and there are cultural misunderstandings, lack of representation that we were talking about earlier, stereotypes, prejudice, and pressure to assimilate, and sometimes also level of being outsiders and insiders at the same time. Beyond that, there are also, like I mentioned, challenges at the within one diaspora community. And there is also challenge between 2 diaspora communities. For instance, one Oromo respondent noted that external identification as a challenge to building their collective identity when they communicate online. So he mentioned that you cannot be an Ethiopian because somebody referred to him, you are an Ethiopian online. He said, no, I'm not Ethiopian. So his answer was, you cannot be an Ethiopian without being an Oromo. If I call myself an Oromo and I believe that I belong to the Oromo, there is no way I'll be an Ethiopian for being an Oromo. And an Eritrean respondent also added how the Ethiopian diaspora community claimed a land that they lost on the Red Sea coast to the Eritrean government through their communication. Still, the Ethiopian member of Ethiopian diaspora community claimed that coast belongs to Ethiopia. And the Eritrean respondent says, as far as we have that communication, we will have the actual war on the ground. And this is again happening back in Horn of Africa, unfortunately. So there are also opportunities that generate out of this challenge. For instance, we use storytelling. There are musics that unites people together. There are art and literatures. Of course, also using digital platforms are connecting people more together, and not only connecting, but also formulating virtual communities that transcend geographical boundaries. I want to share a quote from a Somali respondent who said that self-identification plays a huge role, contrast to the external identification. When we self-identify and that is respected as it is, then this boundary, geographical boundary, and also visual boundary plays no role. He says, even if he's from Djibouti, they say they are Somali, and they have that strong identification. Yes. So I would like to conclude that, of course, communicating collective identity online or offline is not an easy task. It's very complex and dynamic. It is also not an individual and fragmented effort. That is also a call that I'm reaching out to. It is a collective. We are here together because we have a collective interest, that is talking, presenting, and participating in diaspora communication. So just like that, I see in diaspora, communicating diaspora collective is it's not an individual effort, but also it is collective and participative effort. So we need to, I would say, embrace that dynamism and collectivism and move our field from fragmentation to participation. Thank you very much.
Good mic. Yeah, there's another mic. If you want to use it.
If there's no question, I'll go back to it.
Thank you very much, first of all, Dr. Mega. Again, if there are questions, we will take some questions. First question. Okay, then take the first questions, then we.
Thank you very much for. Thank you very much, Venga, for a very brilliant and interesting presentation, also reflecting on some of your old, work. I would like to ask you a question on heterogeneity or the differences and diversity within the diasporan groups that you referred to. From your own work and from your own experience, do you see this heterogeneity as a plus or a minus? And should we, especially projects from governments, should they be looking at that from a positive or a negative aspect? And if positive, how do you think this can really be done practically? I know it's very, might not have all the answer, but I would like to get your perspective on that since you are the expert. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Should I answer or?
Yeah, please, Mega, because we are also kind of running around. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cosmos. Of course, I see this heterogeneity as a blessing. We are not all unique, the same age and the same age. We have various differences when it comes to diaspora community, of course, based on religion, ethnicity. There are differences, not only geographical, but also from that perspective. And I see that as a blessing. And the issue is that how informed are we to celebrate that differences and to unite and work together to achieve whatever goal we set for ourselves. I cannot talk for politicians out there, but they can, of course, use also this diversity to bring people together, mobilize people together, and set the tone like the Americans used to brag as a country of many colors. But unfortunately, there are many other politicians who are blocking the ways and sowing some mistrusts and try to flag out how the others are bad and the others are good. For instance, I know from Ethiopian perspective, Ethiopia is a country of more than 88 ethnic groups. So that means that they have their own language. Each of them have their own language. And the Ethiopian government have came up with the motto of diversity and unity. That is a very, very good term. But in practice, that is not the case. So we can say out loud, but if it's not supported by practice, it will have a huge consequence.
Thank you very much. So that's the part. Now we will start the presentation. Again, doing our two presentation will break. Just a kind reminder for the presenter that We have 15 minutes, including 1 or 2 questions for each presentation. So the first one will start by Abdullah Amar. Abdullah Amar is a research assistant at the Center for Conflict Studies, Phillips University of Marburg, and a student in European Master in Migration and Intercultural Relations at the University of Oldenburg and at the University of Stavanger. He holds a master degree in development policy from South Korea. His research focuses on transnationalism